Students, and on behalf of all of us at the Office for Students, thank you for joining us on this first Insight event in which we're going to be focusing on the first of our regulatory objectives, which is fair access and participation. We're going to be holding 4 of these Insight events over the course of 2019-20, each one addressing one of our regulatory priorities. And the idea behind them is that we bring together experts in the particular policy areas, academics, students, student representative bodies and third sector organisations. And we want to share our perspectives, draw on examples of innovative or impactful practice from institutions around the country, and in that way enrich our understanding, all of our understandings of the issues and how we can strengthen the impact that we have. A few housekeeping things about this morning's session. First of all, we're going to be live streaming the entire session via YouTube. So if you've got any colleagues who are keen to join from afar, then they can tune in by following the link on the website, which is also on the slide there at the bottom. And welcome to all of those of you who are joining us remotely by the live stream. We're going to be making recordings of today's sessions available on our website. We're also going to be using the hashtag Fairer Futures, again on that slide, for those who wish to use Twitter. We're very interested to hear about your reflections and experiences of addressing these issues that we're going to be talking about today. And what we're proposing to do is to set up a series of short videos, which we'll then put onto our website and disseminate through social media. So if any of you have perspectives about what you hear today, or any perspectives about these sorts of issues at all and would like to make a contribution, we would be really delighted to hear from you. So if you can go down in the break or after this morning's session to the room which is flagged by the registration desk. There's videos, staff and support available, and do please pitch up and we will look forward to hearing from you and to help create a short video which, as I say, we will then disseminate. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, so if you do hear a fire alarm, please evacuate the building immediately. There are 2 fire exits, the first through the main front entrance on the ground floor, the second on the lower ground floor by the cafe. You exit through the stairs to the ground floor level to get out. So, today's event, Fair Access and Participation, it coincides with the publication of our Insight briefing, which you would have seen, which is looking at the subject of contextual admissions. We at the Office for Students are challenging universities and colleges to be more ambitious and imaginative in their efforts to reduce persistent access and participation gaps. We know that contextual admissions are one part of the solution to this, and our first panel discussion is going to be addressing that theme, how to use contextual admissions effectively. We are also going to be looking at the critically important issue of how we narrow the attainment gap for Black and minority ethnic students. And then we're going to be moving on to discuss the particular challenges facing local and commuter students. So it's a packed and really important agenda this morning. We've got an absolutely outstanding range of speakers contributing to the discussion and the debate. Thanks to all of our speakers, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you also to the media who are joining us, sitting at the back. We are delighted to have you here. But most of all, as I said, thank you all for joining us. So we're going to turn now to our first session, which is going to be my boss, the chair of the Office for Students, Sir Michael Barber. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. Well, it's a great pleasure being your boss. I don't think of it like that. But anyway, thank you very much. Thanks all for coming. And thanks to all of you for being here, to the array of wonderful speakers and contributors that we've got during the day, and the media colleagues at the back. It's not an accident that this is our first Insight event, and that this is also our first regulatory objective, which is about fair access, and I want to spend the time on that. For those of you who may not be familiar, just briefly on the OFS itself, we were established by the legislation in 2017, the Higher Education and Research Act. We were launched last year with a regulator for higher education in England, specifically, not the whole of the UK, and we're very ambitious for what is a fantastic higher education sector in global terms. For my other work, I'm often abroad. The number of times I hear people say really positive things about higher education in England it just happens all the time. So we're ambitious for the sector, and above all, we're ambitious because of the contribution it can make to the future of our economy, the future of our society, the future of our country. And although we live clearly in uncertain political times, we, the OFS, are determined to advance our agenda with pace and urgency and momentum. We don't want to be held up by the uncertainty of the political climate. And we have a very strong belief in the potential of the higher education sector to increase still further its contribution to the future of our country. One way of thinking about it is we've got the best educated generation of school students in the history of the country going to higher education in one of the best higher education sectors in the world. If you put those two things together, you have to believe that we could do something special. And what today's about is making sure that access to that special opportunity is fair. And we realise, all of us, how far there is to go on that. And it's not just about access, it's about access to university, it's about success in university, as Nicola's just mentioned, and then it's about progression from university into life and work. And we need to make sure it's fair at every stage of that progression. And contextual admissions, and you've all been given this, I think, as you came in. Contextual admissions is one vital part of that. So let me start with access. Fair access is sometimes caricatured as a zero-sum game where poorer kids are denying richer kids places, even though the richer kids may have better A-level results. We're arguing here that that is completely to miss the point. It's a question of not wasting talent in the future as we have been in the past. It's a question of not denying opportunity and a question of not hurting our economy. We need to make the most we can of all of our diverse people, and that's the greatest asset the country will have as you look into the future. And a young person who comes from a tough neighbourhood and gets a certain set of A-level grades has often had to work harder in more difficult circumstances to achieve that than somebody from an equivalent with equivalent grades from a better off neighbourhood. And that's why, as we argue in the Insight brief here, that contextual admissions can play a significant part in opening up fair access. And by the way, we know, and you'll hear some of this later on, we know from some of the research that people are undertaking that students who get in on contextual admissions often do as well or better than other students. So it's not a question of in some way undermining future standards of universities. On the contrary, it's about opening up opportunity. In my past and to this day, when I visit great American universities, and we're going to hear from Kedra Ishop shortly, what I see, obviously there's all kinds of issues about admissions in American universities and controversies, but what I often see is a determination in those universities not just to look at test scores or exam results, but to look at potential for civic leadership, potential future public servants, potential future entrepreneurs. And this search for the future potential is not a perfect science, but the active search for potential is really important. And if those great universities find those kinds of people, they can give them a chance to shine that they wouldn't otherwise have. And however good A-levels are, and I'm a fan of the A-level as an exam, nobody thinks that A-levels alone are the best predictor of, or the sole predictor of future potential. So by reaching beyond traditional intakes in the way that the American universities I've just referred to, and you'll hear from Kedra in a minute, they've got something to teach us. And I should add that some universities in this country are already moving beyond that. In the Insight Brief, as an example from Bristol, 2 days ago I was visiting the University of Birmingham. They've got a thing called Access to Birmingham. I talked to 3 students who've come in effectively on contextual admissions and are doing really well there. So it's not just American universities we can learn from experience here. But it does mean that I think we as a system can be bolder in recognising merit and recognising that the opportunity that universities represent for transforming your future career trajectory needs to be opened to the widest possible and most diverse possible talent pool. As a board, and several of the board members are here and you can talk to them during the day, and the senior team, Nicola and Chris, that you'll hear from, we've been very clear that this is our top priority. We're really keen to use the opportunity as a new organisation to transform from a kind of incremental progress in this area to something much more substantial. So we're addressing it with real ambition, real urgency, and the incremental progress of the last few years is actually quite good and positive, and we don't wish to, we credit people with that, but we think it's not enough. And when I go to universities, I've been to 30 or so universities in the last year and a half, I hear that ambition reflected back. People do want to make greater progress, faster progress. They do believe that's part of the mission of the higher education sector, but actually doing it day to day is the big challenge. The leadership of this growing movement, as I hope it will become, from our point of view, lies with Chris Millward, the Director of Fair Access and Participation. You'll hear from him in a minute. That role is created in law, separate and distinct, with powers vested in the holder of that office. So it's a very sharply defined key mission as part of the wider Office for Students, and it couldn't be in better hands. So we really want to seize the moment, and I'm just going to list 5 things that I think could be done in order to advance it. One is, I've mentioned it already, ambition. But the key thing with ambition is to turn it from a general aspiration into very specific, measurable goals. And we want people to set goals for the future and then track progress towards them. So we turn the ambition into something concrete and measurable and trackable. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it needs to be a sustained drive. When Chris started consulting on the new approach to fair access and participation, he heard people say, well, just doing it 1 year at a time, as was the old pattern, was helping make progress, but it stood in the way of taking a strategic perspective, an ambitious perspective. So we've changed that. And universities are invited to think 3 to 5 years out. What could they do over that period of time? So the first point was ambition and turning it into trackable goals. The second is sustained drive over a 3 to 5 year period. None of this will happen without sustained effort. Bertolt Brecht once said, socialism will never come. Sorry, he said the red dawn of socialism will not come after a night of sleep. And I'm not talking about the red dawn of socialism, but I am talking about fair access and participation, and it won't come after a night of sleep. This is going to be very, very hard work. So ambition and a sustained drive. Thirdly, there needs to be some pressure for change, and that's part of our job. The access and participation plans that Chris has invited universities to submit are part of that pressure. The targets that we're going to debate with universities are part of that pressure. The regulatory framework and the powers it gives us and the powers vested in Chris's office, these are part of the pressure. But big change doesn't come just from pressure, it comes from support as well, which is the fourth point. So we've got our the National Collaborative Outreach Programme, which we're investing money in, supporting a range of initiatives in that area. We're helping with the data, some of which we published very recently and which all of you will have seen or certainly have access to, and that will enable much better informed discussion around the system as we do this. Thirdly, on this support point, we're setting up this new centre for sharing best practice, which goes under the short name of TASO, but it actually stands for the Centre for the Transformation of Access and Student Outcomes in Higher Education. So this is going to be a place where people can find out what's going on, find out what's working, building very much on the kind of what works centres that have been used in other parts of the social sector over the last few years. So I think that will be an important contribution. So the idea is to get the right combination of pressure and support. And then the final, my fifth point is continuous learning. If we're going to achieve some of these ambitious goals that universities will set, one of the interesting things about an ambitious goal is often when you set it, you don't know enough to achieve it. If you did know enough, it wouldn't be that ambitious. But if it's a really ambitious goal, you don't know enough at the beginning. You have to learn as you go. And that's about using the data, the best practice, the benchmarking, all of the things that we will put in place. So that combination of real ambition turned into measurable goals, sustained drive, pressure for change, support for change, and then this sense of continuous learning, these things can enable us to achieve things that we might well have thought, might even now some of us think are not possible. These are things that we can do. The last point I want to make before introducing the next speaker is this. Sometimes on visits to universities I hear people say, well, you've set it all out in inviting plans and you consulted and now you've set out the regulatory framework, and but some people in the university say, well, actually, maybe your regulatory framework will get in the way of some of the more ambitious risk-taking things we'd like to do. What I want to say, if anybody in a university who thinks they want to be more ambitious than we are, more innovative than we are, more risk-taking than we are, you tell us what that is, and we'll find a way, if we share a view on that, of making it possible. So if you want to be more ambitious than Chris is asking you to be, don't feel that anything in the regulatory framework will stand in the way, because if you can beat the level of ambition that Chris is injecting through the system, we'd welcome that. If you can be more risk-taking and think it through, feel free to come to us and say what you'd like to do. We're in favour of ambition.